Welcome to today's episode, where we unravel one of history's greatest maritime mysteries. Picture this. It's 793 CE, and Viking longships emerge from the morning mist off the coast of Lindisfarne. These wooden vessels, no larger than a modern school bus, have somehow crossed hundreds of miles of treacherous North Sea without a single map, compass, or GPS device. Yet they arrive with pinpoint accuracy at their target. How is this possible? How did these Norse seafarers become the most successful maritime explorers of their age, reaching Iceland, Greenland, and even North America 5 centuries before Columbus saw, while navigating by methods that seem almost magical to our modern minds? Today, we're embarking on an epic journey across storm-tossed seas and through the ingenious minds of Viking navigators. We'll discover how they read the ocean like a book, turn wildlife into compasses, and use techniques so sophisticated that modern sailors still struggle to replicate them. From the fjords of Norway to the shores of Newfoundland, we follow in the wake of history's most daring seafarers and unlock the secrets that allowed them to conquer the seas without maps. This isn't just a story about boats and battles. It's about human ingenuity, courage, and the relentless drive to explore the unknown. The Vikings didn't just stumble across new lands. They developed a navigation system so precise it would make modern GPS jealous. Chapter 1. Birth of Viking Seamanship. The year is 750 CE, and in the sheltered waters of a Norwegian fjord, a young apprentice shipwright named Olav watches his master carefully shape the curved prow of what will become a legendary longship. The smell of pine resin fills the air as generations of accumulated knowledge flows from weathered hands to eager wood. This isn't just shipbuilding. This is the birth of a maritime revolution that will reshape the world. The Vikings didn't become master seafarers overnight. Their maritime mastery evolved from centuries of necessity, innovation, and intimate knowledge of their harsh coastal environment. Living in a land where the sea provided both sustenance and highway, the Norse people developed an almost supernatural relationship with the ocean that would set them apart from every other civilization of their time. The foundation of Viking seamanship lies in their revolutionary ship design. Unlike the heavy, deep-keeled vessels of other medieval cultures, Viking ships represent a masterpiece of engineering compromise. The iconic longship, with its shallow draft and flexible construction, can navigate both open ocean and shallow rivers with equal ease. These vessels draw less than 3 feet of water when fully loaded, allowing Vikings to beach directly on shores and sail up rivers that other ships cannot access. The secret lies in the construction technique. Viking shipwrights build their vessels using the clinker method, overlapping oak planks that flex with the waves rather than fighting them. Each plank is carefully selected, shaped, and fitted, creating a hull that breathes with the sea. The result is a vessel that can ride over waves rather than cutting through them, reducing stress on both ship and crew during long ocean voyages. But the ship is only half the equation. The other half is the men who sail them, and here the Vikings possess something equally revolutionary, a culture that breeds natural navigators. From childhood, Norse boys learn to read the subtle signs of sea and sky. They memorize the patterns of wind and wave, the behavior of seabirds, and the ever-changing face of the northern heavens. This isn't formal education. It's survival training passed down through generations of seafaring families. The Viking navigator, known as the steersman or steeramar, occupies a position of immense respect within Norse society. These men possess knowledge that seems almost mystical to outsiders, the ability to find land across hundreds of miles of open ocean, using nothing but their senses and generations of accumulated wisdom. They memorize sailing directions that read like poetry. Sail west from Norway until you see the mountains of Iceland rise from the sea like sleeping giants. The economic incentives driving this maritime development are as powerful as the cultural ones. By 800 CE, Scandinavia faces a crisis of resources and opportunity. The climate is cooling, reducing agricultural yields, while the population continues to grow. The traditional Viking solution is characteristically direct. If resources are scarce at home, find them elsewhere. But this requires the ability to cross dangerous waters reliably and repeatedly. A challenge that sparks unprecedented innovation in navigation and seamanship. The Vikings also benefit from their unique geographic position. Scandinavia's deeply indented coastline creates thousands of natural harbors and sheltered waterways, where ships can be tested and crews trained in relative safety. The region's long summer days provide extended periods for navigation practice, while the harsh winter months offer time for ship maintenance and the transmission of nautical knowledge through storytelling and formal instruction. Archaeological evidence reveals the sophistication of early Viking maritime culture. Excavations at sites like Roskilde in Denmark have uncovered ship burials dating to the 9th century, showing vessels of remarkable complexity and craftsmanship. These aren't crude boats, but sophisticated machines designed for specific purposes, some built for coastal raiding, others for deep ocean exploration, and still others for cargo transport across vast distances. The development of Viking seamanship also benefits from cultural exchange with other maritime peoples. The Norse maintained trading relationships with the Frisians, who possess advanced knowledge of tidal navigation, and with Celtic seafarers, who contribute their own techniques for reading ocean conditions. This cultural cross-pollination accelerates Viking maritime development, creating a synthesis of techniques that proves devastatingly effective. By 793 CE, when Viking raiders first strike Lindisfarne, they arrive not as lucky barbarians who stumbled across the sea, but as the products of generations of maritime evolution. Their success marks not the beginning of Viking seamanship, but its coming of age, the moment when centuries of accumulated knowledge and innovation finally reached the critical mass needed to project power across the medieval world's most dangerous waters. The stage is now set for the most remarkable period of maritime exploration in human history, as Viking navigators prepare to push beyond the familiar waters of Scandinavia into the vast and unknown Atlantic. Chapter 2. Language of Wind and Wave. The dawn mist clings to the waters off the Lofoten Islands as Bjorn the Red-Bearded stands at the prow of his longship, studying the subtle patterns dancing across the ocean's surface. To an untrained eye, the sea appears uniform, an endless expanse of gray-green water beneath an overcast sky. But Bjorn sees something entirely different. He reads the ocean like a manuscript written in wind and wave, each ripple and swell telling him exactly where he is and where he needs to go. This is the first and most fundamental skill of Viking navigation, the ability to interpret the ocean as constant communication. Modern sailors, dependent on instruments and charts, have largely lost this ancient art, but for the Vikings, reading water conditions is as natural as breathing. The technique requires years to master and a lifetime to perfect, transforming experienced navigators into human instruments of extraordinary precision. The foundation of this skill lies in understanding wave patterns and their behavior. Ocean waves are not random disturbances, but organized systems that follow predictable rules. The Vikings identify 4 distinct types of waves, each carrying different information about wind, weather, and nearby land. Wind waves, generated by local weather conditions, tell the navigator about immediate atmospheric conditions. Swell waves, created by distant storms, provide information about weather systems hundreds of miles away that may affect the voyage. More importantly, Vikings learn to detect and follow wave refraction patterns, the way waves bend and change direction when they encounter underwater obstacles or approaching land. As waves approach a coastline, they begin to refract hours or even days before land becomes visible. An experienced navigator can detect these subtle changes in wave direction and use them to locate invisible islands or navigate toward distant shores with remarkable accuracy. The technique requires extraordinary sensory sensitivity. Viking navigators train themselves to feel wave patterns through the ship's hull, detecting variations in rhythm and amplitude that reveal crucial navigation information. They learn to distinguish between the regular pulse of deep ocean swells and the confused chop that indicates shallow water or the presence of underwater obstacles. Some navigators develop the ability to detect land-reflected wave swells that have bounced off distant coastlines and return to sea, creating subtle interference patterns that point directly toward shore. Wind reading represents another crucial component of Viking navigation skills. The Norse develop an intimate understanding of regional wind patterns, learning to predict weather changes days in advance by observing cloud formations, atmospheric pressure changes, and the behavior of wind-driven waves. They memorize the seasonal wind patterns of different regions, knowing that certain winds blow from specific directions at predictable times of year. The Vikings also mastered the art of wind-shadow navigation, using the wind-blocking effects of distant mountains and islands to locate land before it becomes visible. As wind encounters a large landmass, it creates distinctive patterns of acceleration and deceleration that can be detected far from shore. An experienced navigator can detect the wind shadow of a mountain range or large island from distances of 50 miles or more, using these atmospheric disturbances to navigate directly toward invisible land. Color changes in the ocean provide another layer of navigation information. Different types of seafloor create different water colors, and Vikings learn to associate specific hues with particular depths and bottom conditions. Shallow water over sand appears bright green, while deep water over rock shows dark blue or black. More importantly, watercolor changes can indicate the presence of underwater currents, upwelling areas, and other oceanographic features that help pinpoint location. The behavior of foam and surface debris offers additional navigation clues. Wind-blown foam creates patterns that reveal wind direction and strength, while floating debris follows current patterns that indicate the ship's position relative to land. Vikings become expert at reading these subtle signs, using everything from floating seaweed to bird droppings as navigation aids. Temperature variations in air and water provide yet another source of navigation information. Ocean currents of different temperatures create distinctive atmospheric effects that experienced navigators can detect and use for positioning. The warm Gulf Stream, for instance, creates characteristic fog patterns and temperature gradients that help navigators locate their position in the North Atlantic. The Vikings also developed techniques for measuring water depth and bottom composition without modern-sounding equipment. They use weighted lines to test depth and bottom type, but more remarkably, they learned to estimate depth by observing wave behavior and water color. Experienced navigators can estimate depth to within a few feet simply by watching how waves move across the surface. Perhaps most impressively, Viking navigators learned to detect the presence of land through subtle changes in wave reflection patterns. When ocean swells encounter a coastline, they create complex interference patterns that propagate far out to sea. A master navigator can detect these reflected waves and use them to locate land that lies completely beyond the horizon, sometimes at distances of 30 miles or more. This extraordinary sensitivity to ocean conditions doesn't develop overnight. Young Vikings spend years at sea under the guidance of experienced navigators, gradually developing the sensory skills and pattern recognition abilities needed for successful ocean navigation. The training is intensive and never-ending. Even experienced navigators continue learning throughout their careers, constantly refining their ability to read the ocean's ever-changing messages. By combining all these techniques, Viking navigators create a comprehensive picture of their maritime environment that rivals modern electronic navigation systems in accuracy and reliability. They transform the seemingly chaotic ocean into an ordered system of information, using their enhanced senses and accumulated knowledge to navigate with precision that astounds their contemporaries and continues to impress modern sailors who attempt to replicate their achievements. Chapter 3. Sun and Celestial Navigation. High above the Arctic Circle, where summer brings endless daylight and winter plunges the world into perpetual darkness, a Viking navigator named Thorstein Eriksson faces his greatest challenge yet. He's leading a fleet toward Greenland, but thick clouds have obscured the sky for 3 days running. No sun, no stars, just an oppressive gray dome that seems to swallow the world. Yet Thorstein shows no sign of concern as he reaches into a leather pouch and withdraws what appears to be an ordinary piece of crystal. This simple stone, known to the Norse as a sunstone, is about to reveal one of the most sophisticated navigation techniques in human history. The Vikings' mastery of celestial navigation represents perhaps their greatest intellectual achievement, a systematic approach to using sun, stars, and atmospheric phenomena that rivals modern astronomical navigation in complexity and exceeds it in practical reliability. Unlike their southern contemporaries, who depend on the consistent tropical sun, Viking navigators must contend with the extreme conditions of northern waters, where the sun's path varies dramatically with season and latitude, and where weather can obscure celestial bodies for days at a time. The foundation of Viking celestial navigation is the sun compass, an ingenious device that transforms the sun's apparent movement into a precise navigation tool. Archaeological discoveries in Greenland have revealed wooden disc fragments with intricate notch patterns that represent the sun's path at different times of year and different latitudes. These devices allow navigators to determine both direction and approximate latitude with remarkable precision, even when the sun is only briefly visible through clouds. The sun compass operates on a principle of elegant simplicity. At any given location and time of year, the sun follows a predictable arc across the sky. By marking this arc on a circular disk and noting the shadows cast by a central gnomon, navigators can determine true north with an accuracy that often exceeds modern magnetic compasses. The device accounts for the sun's changing declination throughout the year, allowing for precise navigation from the spring equinox through the autumn months. But the Vikings' true genius lies in their solution to navigation during the white nights of summer, when the sun never sets, and the dark months of winter, when it never rises. For summer navigation, they developed techniques for using the sun's position at any hour to determine direction and latitude. They memorized the sun's height at different times of day for various latitudes, creating mental tables that allow them to navigate continuously throughout the endless daylight of the northern summer. The legendary sunstone represents one of the most remarkable innovations in navigation history. These crystals, likely calcite or cordierite, possess unusual optical properties that allow them to locate the sun's position even when it is completely obscured by clouds or fog. When viewed through the crystal at the correct angle, the sun's position creates distinctive optical patterns that remain visible even through thick overcast. Modern experiments have confirmed that skilled operators can locate the sun's position to within 5 degrees using this technique, even under conditions of complete cloud cover. The use of sunstones requires considerable skill and experience. Navigators must learn to recognize the subtle optical effects that indicate the sun's direction, and they must practice extensively to achieve the precision needed for accurate navigation. Archaeological evidence suggests that sunstones were highly prized and carefully maintained, passed down through generations of navigators as treasured family heirlooms. Star navigation represents another crucial component of Viking celestial technique. The Norse develop an intimate knowledge of the northern sky, memorizing the positions and movements of key stars and constellations. They pay particular attention to Polaris, the North Star, which provides a reliable reference point for determining direction and latitude. However, they also learn to navigate using other stars when Polaris is obscured, or when sailing in southern latitudes where it becomes less useful. The Vikings identify and name dozens of navigation stars, creating a comprehensive stellar navigation system that allows for precise positioning throughout the night. They learn to measure star heights using simple handspan techniques, estimating latitude by observing how high certain stars appear above the horizon. This method, known as star lifting, provides positioning accuracy comparable to modern sextant observations when performed by experienced navigators. Moon navigation adds another layer to Viking celestial technique. The Norse learned to use the moon's phases and position for navigation, particularly during the long winter nights when the sun provides no assistance. They developed techniques for using moonlight to observe wave patterns and water conditions that would be invisible in complete darkness. The Vikings also mastered the art of reading atmospheric optical phenomena for navigation clues. They learned to interpret the various types of halos, sundogs, and ice crystals that appear in northern skies, using these phenomena to predict weather changes and estimate their position relative to land masses. The famous ice blink, a distinctive atmospheric reflection caused by ice fields, allows navigators to detect the presence of sea ice or glaciated land from distances of 50 miles or more. Perhaps most remarkably, Viking navigators developed techniques for maintaining accurate direction during periods of complete overcast when no celestial references are available. They learned to use wind direction, wave patterns, and even the flight patterns of migrating birds as substitute compass references, maintaining their course with impressive accuracy, even during extended periods without sun or star sightings. The integration of all these celestial techniques creates a navigation system of extraordinary sophistication and reliability. Viking navigators do not depend on any single method, but instead combine multiple techniques to cross-check their position and course continuously. They develop contingency plans for every possible combination of weather and visibility conditions, ensuring that they can navigate accurately regardless of what nature throws at them. This mastery of celestial navigation allows the Vikings to undertake voyages that seem impossible to their contemporaries. They can sail directly across hundreds of miles of open ocean, arriving at destinations with pinpoint accuracy, despite having no maps or modern instruments. Their success opens up new worlds for exploration and settlement, from the rich fishing grounds of Iceland to the mysterious forests of North America. The sophistication of Viking celestial navigation continues to impress modern navigators who attempt to replicate their achievements using traditional techniques. Many discover that the Norse methods, when properly applied, provide navigation accuracy that rivals GPS in many conditions and often proves more reliable when modern electronics fail. Chapter 4. Living Compasses. Dawn breaks over the Denmark. Straight as Eirik the navigator spots something that fills him with more confidence than any modern GPS could provide. A lone Fulmer petrel wheeling through the morning air, its distinctive flight pattern telling him that land lies exactly 37 miles to the northwest. The bird's behavior isn't random. It's following an ancient pattern known to generations of Viking seafarers, transforming this solitary seabird into a living compass pointing directly toward the unseen shores of Iceland. The Vikings' use of wildlife for navigation represents one of their most ingenious and least understood techniques. While other medieval seafarers view animals as mere curiosities or omens, the Norse develop a sophisticated understanding of animal behavior that transforms the ocean's creatures into a comprehensive navigation network. This biological compass proves more reliable than magnetic instruments and provides information that no mechanical device can match. Seabirds form the backbone of Viking biological navigation. The Norse cataloged the behavior patterns of dozens of species, learning to interpret their flight directions, feeding habits, and roosting behaviors as precise navigation indicators. Different bird species provide different types of information. Some indicate the direction to the nearest land. Others reveal the presence of specific types of coastline. and still others warn of approaching weather changes that could affect the voyage. The fulmar, gull, and gannet become particularly valuable navigation aids because of their predictable daily routines. These seabirds fly out to sea each morning to feed and return to their nesting sites each evening, creating reliable flight paths that point directly toward land. Experienced navigators learn to distinguish between birds heading out to sea and those returning to shore, using this information to determine both the direction and approximate distance to the nearest coastline. The Vikings also discover that different bird species indicate different types of land. Kittiwakes and guillemots suggest rocky cliffs suitable for nesting, while duck species indicate marshlands and river mouths. Puffins and razorbills point toward grassy headlands where they can dig their burrows. This information proves invaluable when approaching an unknown coast, allowing navigators to predict what type of landing sites they'll find before the shore becomes visible. Perhaps most remarkably, the Vikings learned to use the absence of certain birds as navigation information. When land-based birds disappear entirely, navigators know they've entered deep ocean waters far from any shore. When pelagic species birds that spend their entire lives at sea begin to appear, it confirms that the ship has reached truly oceanic conditions. This negative information proves just as valuable as positive sightings in maintaining accurate position estimates. The technique extends beyond individual bird behavior to include flock dynamics and seasonal migrations. Viking navigators memorized the seasonal timing of major bird migrations, using these massive movements as both calendar and compass. The spring migration of geese and swans provides reliable directional references as millions of birds follow ancient flyways between their breeding and wintering grounds. The timing of these migrations also helps navigators confirm their latitude. Certain species appear earlier or later depending on how far north the ship has traveled. Marine mammals provide another layer of biological navigation information. The Vikings develop an encyclopedic knowledge of whale behavior, learning to distinguish between different species by their breathing patterns, feeding habits, and migration routes. Certain whale species feed in specific water depths and temperatures, providing clues about the ship's position relative to continental shelves and ocean currents. Seals and walruses indicate the proximity of ice, rocky shores, or specific types of coastline where these animals haul out to rest and breed. The direction seals swim when diving for food often points toward underwater, features like shoals or banks that can serve as navigation landmarks. The Vikings even learned to interpret the calls of marine mammals, using sound to locate animals and their associated navigation features during periods of low visibility. Fish behavior adds yet another dimension to biological navigation. The Vikings observed that certain fish species school in predictable patterns relative to coastlines, currents, and water temperatures. The presence of specific fish types indicates particular ocean conditions, helping navigators confirm their position and course. Feeding frenzies where seabirds dive to attack fish schools create visible disturbances that can be spotted from great distances, providing navigation references in otherwise featureless ocean areas. The Norse also developed techniques for using insects as navigation aids. Land-based insects blown out to sea indicate wind direction and the proximity of shore. Different insects appear at different distances from land, providing rough estimates of how far the ship has traveled from the coast. During summer months, the appearance of specific flying insects can indicate that land lies upwind within a day's sailing. Even floating debris becomes part of the biological navigation system. The Vikings learned to identify different types of seaweed, driftwood, and other organic material, using these clues to determine ocean currents, wind patterns, and proximity to land. Fresh vegetation indicates recent departure from shore, while highly weathered material suggests deep ocean conditions. The integration of all these biological indicators creates a dynamic, three-dimensional navigation system that provides constantly updated information about the ship's environment. Unlike mechanical instruments that provide single-point measurements, biological navigation offers comprehensive environmental awareness that helps navigators understand not just where they are, but where they're going and what conditions they're likely to encounter. The Vikings' mastery of biological navigation requires extraordinary observational skills and encyclopedic knowledge of natural history. Young navigators spend years learning to identify and interpret hundreds of different species and behaviors, developing the pattern recognition abilities needed to extract navigation information from the complex web of life that surrounds their ships. This biological approach to navigation proves particularly valuable during long ocean passages, where traditional landmarks are absent for days or weeks at a time. The constant presence of wildlife provides continuous navigation references, allowing Viking navigators to maintain accurate courses and positions even in the vast emptiness of the North Atlantic. The technique also provides early warning of dangerous conditions. Changes in animal behavior often indicate approaching storms, ice fields, or other hazards long before they become visible to human observers. This advance warning allows Viking navigators to take evasive action or seek shelter before conditions become life-threatening. Modern attempts to replicate Viking biological navigation techniques have revealed the extraordinary sophistication of this approach. Experienced naturalists working with traditional sailing vessels have confirmed that skilled observers can indeed extract precise navigation information from wildlife behavior, achieving accuracy that rivals mechanical instruments under many conditions. Chapter 5: Magnetic Anomalies in Crystal Navigation. In the workshop of a Viking craftsman named Magnus, hidden deep within a Norwegian fjord, an extraordinary discovery is about to change maritime history forever. As Magnus experiments with a piece of lodestone, a naturally magnetized iron ore, he notices something that will puzzle historians for over 1,000 years. The stone consistently points toward the same direction, but not exactly north. Instead, it seems to point towards something else, something invisible yet constant. Magnus has just discovered magnetic declination, and his observations will contribute to one of the most sophisticated navigation techniques in the ancient world. The Vikings' understanding and use of magnetic phenomena represents one of the most controversial aspects of their navigation abilities. While traditional history suggests that magnetic compasses didn't reach Europe until the 12th century, mounting archaeological and literary evidence indicates that the Norse may have developed their own magnetic navigation techniques centuries earlier, creating a system that was both more primitive and more sophisticated than the Chinese invented compass. Archaeological excavations have uncovered tantalizing hints of Viking magnetic navigation. Sites across Scandinavia have yielded carefully shaped pieces of magnetite and other magnetic minerals, often found in association with navigation equipment and shipbuilding tools. These artifacts suggest that the Vikings not only knew about magnetic materials, but actively sought them out and incorporated them into their maritime technology. The Viking approach to magnetic navigation differs fundamentally from later compass designs. Rather than creating a freely rotating needle, the Norse appear to have used magnetic stones as directional indicators in combination with other navigation techniques. They discover that lodestone can be used to magnetize iron needles, creating temporary compasses that provide directional references when other methods fail. More intriguingly, Viking navigators seem to understand the concept of magnetic declination, the difference between magnetic north and true north long before this phenomenon is formally recognized by European science. Runic inscriptions and saga references suggest that experienced navigators know their magnetic stones do not point to true north, and they develop correction techniques to account for this variation. The Vikings also appear to recognize that magnetic declination changes with geographic location. requiring different corrections in different parts of their sailing range. This understanding implies a level of systematic observation and record-keeping that rivals modern magnetic surveying techniques. Some scholars suggest that Viking navigators maintained mental or physical maps of magnetic variation across the North Atlantic, allowing them to use magnetic references accurately throughout their extensive sailing range. The integration of magnetic techniques with other navigation methods creates a uniquely Viking approach to direction finding. Rather than relying solely on magnetic bearings, Norse navigators use magnetic indicators as one component of a multi-layered navigation system. They cross-check magnetic readings against celestial observations, wind patterns, and biological indicators, creating a redundant system that maintains accuracy even when individual components fail. The famous sunstone technique takes on new significance when viewed in the context of magnetic navigation. While sunstones can locate the sun's position during overcast conditions, they can also be used in combination with magnetic materials to establish precise directional references. Some researchers suggest that the Vikings used the sunstones and lodestones together, creating a navigation system that combines solar and magnetic bearings for enhanced accuracy. The Vikings' understanding of magnetic phenomena extends beyond simple direction finding to include the recognition of local magnetic anomalies. Certain geographic features, iron ore deposits, volcanic formations, and specific rock types create distinctive magnetic signatures that experienced navigators learn to recognize and use as position references. These magnetic landmarks provide navigation aids that remain consistent regardless of weather or visibility conditions. The Norse also developed techniques for detecting and compensating for magnetic interference caused by iron objects aboard their ships. They learned that weapons, tools, and other iron equipment can deflect magnetic stones, and they developed procedures for isolating magnetic navigation equipment from these influences. This understanding indicates a sophisticated grasp of magnetic principles that would not be formally understood in European science for centuries. Crystal navigation represents another mysterious aspect of Viking techniques that may involve magnetic principles. Beyond the famous sunstones used for solar navigation, the Vikings appear to have used various crystals and minerals for other navigation purposes. Some of these materials exhibit magnetic properties, while others display optical characteristics that might assist in navigation under specific conditions. Recent experiments have revealed that certain crystals can display distinctive optical patterns when exposed to polarized light, potentially providing navigation information even when the sun is completely obscured. The Vikings' knowledge of crystal properties may have extended far beyond the sunstone technique, encompassing a range of mineral-based navigation aids that exploited various physical phenomena. The development of magnetic navigation techniques requires access to appropriate materials and the knowledge to work with them effectively. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Vikings established extensive trade networks specifically to obtain high-quality magnetic stones and navigation crystals. These materials were highly valued and carefully maintained, passed down through generations of navigators as precious family resources. The integration of magnetic and crystal navigation techniques with traditional methods creates a uniquely robust navigation system that provides multiple independent references for direction and position. This redundancy proves crucial during challenging ocean passages where individual navigation techniques might fail or provide ambiguous results. The Vikings' magnetic navigation abilities may help explain some of their most remarkable achievements. The precision required for direct voyages from Norway to Iceland or from Iceland to Greenland becomes more understandable when magnetic techniques are added to the navigation toolkit. These methods provide the accuracy and reliability needed for such ambitious undertakings. Modern attempts to replicate Viking magnetic navigation have produced mixed results, partly because the Earth's magnetic field has changed significantly since the Viking Age, Magnetic declination values that were accurate 1,000 years ago no longer apply, making it difficult to test Viking techniques using modern magnetic conditions. However, experiments using reconstructed historical magnetic conditions have demonstrated the potential effectiveness of Viking magnetic navigation methods. The sophistication of Viking magnetic and crystal navigation remains one of the most intriguing mysteries of medieval technology. Whether the Norse developed these techniques independently or adapted them from other sources, their mastery of magnetic phenomena represents a remarkable achievement that predates formal European understanding of magnetism by centuries. The legacy of Viking magnetic navigation may extend far beyond their own achievements. Some historians suggest that Viking knowledge of magnetic techniques may have influenced later European compass development, contributing to the maritime revolution that would eventually lead to global exploration and colonization. Chapter 7. Journeys to Iceland and Beyond. The year is 874 CE, and Ingolfur Arnarson stands at the bow of his longship as the distinctive flat-topped mountains of Iceland emerge from the North Atlantic haze. Behind him, 30 families huddle against the cold spray, their entire lives packed into the limited space of 3 wooden vessels. Ahead lies an uninhabited island that will become their new home if they can successfully navigate the treacherous waters surrounding this volcanic wilderness. Ingolfur reaches into his sea chest and withdraws a pair of carved wooden pillars, the traditional high seat pillars that will determine where he establishes his new settlement. According to custom, he will throw these pillars overboard as his ship approaches the coast, then establish his home wherever they wash ashore. The Viking discovery and settlement of Iceland represents the first major test of Norse oceanic navigation capabilities. This achievement requires crossing nearly 600 miles of some of the world's most dangerous waters, navigating through an area where Arctic and temperate currents collide, creating unpredictable weather patterns and treacherous sea conditions. The success of this colonization effort validates centuries of navigation development and sets the stage for even more ambitious voyages into the unknown Atlantic. The initial discovery of Iceland occurs almost by accident when a Viking named Nadod, sailing from Norway to the Faroe Islands, is blown off course by storms and sights the eastern coast of the unknown island. However, the systematic exploration and colonization that follows requires deliberate navigation planning of unprecedented scope and precision. The Norse must develop new techniques for crossing the Denmark Strait, where warm Gulf Stream water meets cold Arctic currents, creating some of the most challenging navigation conditions on Earth. The voyage from Norway to Iceland presents unique navigation challenges that force Viking seafarers to expand their traditional techniques. The journey crosses multiple climate zones, requiring navigation methods that work in both temperate and subarctic conditions. The route passes through areas where magnetic declination changes significantly, demanding new approaches to compass navigation. Most challenging of all, the passage traverses regions where traditional navigation landmarks, coastlines, islands, and familiar current patterns disappear for days at a time. Ingolfur Arnarson and his fellow settlers develop systematic exploration techniques that will become standard practice for all subsequent Viking expansion efforts. They conduct preliminary reconnaissance voyages to map coastlines, identify safe harbors, and locate sources of fresh water and building materials. These exploratory missions require extraordinary navigation precision, the ability to return to Norway with accurate sailing directions, then lead settlement fleets back to specific locations on a largely unknown coast. The navigation techniques developed for the Iceland voyages represent a synthesis of all Viking navigation knowledge. Celestial navigation becomes crucial for maintaining course during the long passages between familiar landmarks. The extreme northern latitude of Iceland requires new approaches to solar navigation, as the sun's path differs dramatically from its behavior in Scandinavian waters. The navigators must learn to use the midnight sun of summer and the extended darkness of winter as navigation aids rather than obstacles. Current navigation reaches new levels of sophistication during the Iceland settlement period. The Denmark Strait contains complex current systems that can either assist or hinder progress, depending on the navigator's ability to detect and exploit them properly. The Irminger Current provides favorable conditions for westbound vessels, while the East Greenland Current creates dangerous conditions for ships attempting to approach Iceland from the north. The biological navigation techniques pioneered during coastal voyages prove invaluable for the Iceland crossings. Seabirds provide crucial navigation assistance, with different species indicating the approach of Iceland at various distances. The distinctive Icelandic puffin colonies create navigation landmarks visible from 30 miles at sea, while the behavior of Arctic terns and foamers helps navigators locate specific coastal features and safe anchorages. Weather prediction becomes critical for successful Iceland voyages. The island sits at the convergence of multiple weather systems, creating rapidly changing conditions that can trap unwary sailors or destroy ships caught in the wrong waters at the wrong time. Viking navigators developed sophisticated techniques for reading weather signs, learning to predict the severe storms that regularly sweep across the Denmark Strait. They memorized the seasonal weather patterns that affect different parts of the Iceland route, timing their voyages to take advantage of favorable conditions while avoiding the most dangerous periods. The settlement of Iceland also requires new approaches to coastal navigation and harbor identification. Iceland's coastline differs dramatically from the familiar fjords and skerries of Scandinavia. The island's volcanic origins create distinctive coastal features, black sand beaches, basalt cliffs, and geothermal areas that provide unique navigation landmarks, but require new techniques for safe approach and anchorage. The success of the Iceland settlement creates a template for future Viking expansion efforts. The techniques developed for crossing the Denmark Strait prove adaptable to other oceanic voyages, while the systematic approach to exploration and colonization becomes standard practice for all subsequent Norse expansion. The Iceland colony also serves as a crucial way station for further westward exploration, providing a base for provisioning and staging even more ambitious voyages into the unknown Atlantic. The psychological impact of the Iceland achievement cannot be understated. Successfully establishing a permanent colony 600 miles from the nearest known land demonstrates that the Atlantic Ocean is not an impassable barrier but a navigable highway to new opportunities. This success emboldens future generations of Viking explorers to push even farther into the unknown, ultimately leading to the discovery of Greenland and North America. The navigation records preserved from the Iceland settlement period provide invaluable insights into Viking techniques and capabilities. The sailing directions recorded in the Landnámabók and other sources reveal the precision and systematization of Norse navigation knowledge. These records describe specific landmarks, sailing times, and seasonal considerations that allow subsequent voyagers to replicate successful passages with remarkable consistency. Archaeological evidence from Iceland confirms the sophistication of Viking navigation planning. The distribution of early settlement sites reflects careful consideration of harbor accessibility, resource availability, and defensibility factors that require detailed coastal reconnaissance and systematic evaluation of colonization potential. The success rate of these early settlements suggests that the site selection process was based on comprehensive knowledge rather than random exploration. The Iceland colony becomes a launching pad for the most ambitious navigation achievements in Viking history. From Reykjavik and other Icelandic ports, Norse explorers will push westward into the Davis Strait, discovering Greenland and establishing colonies that survive for nearly 500 years. The navigation techniques perfected during the Iceland settlement provide the foundation for these even more challenging voyages into the heart of the North Atlantic. The legacy of the Iceland voyages extends far beyond Viking history. The systematic approach to oceanic exploration and colonization developed during this period influences all subsequent European expansion efforts. The navigation techniques, exploration methods, and colonization strategies pioneered by the Iceland settlers provide templates that will be used centuries later during the Age of Exploration, when European powers begin their own attempts to cross oceanic barriers and establish distant colonies. Chapter 8. Greenland. Erik the Red stands on a windswept promontory overlooking the ice-choked waters of the Davis Strait, his weathered face set in determination as he surveys the most forbidding seascape in the known world. Behind him, a small fleet of longships rides at anchor in a protected fjord, their crews making final preparations for what many consider a suicide mission: the establishment of permanent settlements on the edge of the world's ice. The year is 985 CE, and Erik is about to attempt something that challenges every principle of medieval navigation, leading a colonization fleet across 450 miles of Arctic waters to establish communities in one of Earth's most hostile environments. The discovery and settlement of Greenland represents the ultimate test of Viking navigation capabilities. This achievement requires mastering navigation techniques in conditions that would defeat most modern sailors' waters, where icebergs drift like floating mountains, where magnetic compasses become unreliable due to proximity to the magnetic pole, and where traditional navigation landmarks disappear beneath miles of glacial ice. The success of the Greenland colonies demonstrates that Viking navigation has evolved into a precision science capable of operating under the most extreme conditions on Earth. Erik's initial discovery of Greenland occurs during his exile from Iceland for manslaughter, a 3-year banishment that he transforms into the most significant exploration achievement of the Viking Age. Sailing west from Iceland's Snæfellsnes Peninsula, Erik navigates across the Denmark Strait using techniques that push Viking seamanship to its absolute limits. The crossing requires threading a path between the East Greenland Current, which carries massive icebergs south from the Arctic Ocean, and the warmer Irminger Current, which provides the only navigable water in this frozen wilderness. The navigation challenges of reaching Greenland dwarf those encountered during the Iceland settlement. The Davis Strait represents one of the world's most treacherous bodies of water, where Arctic conditions can change within hours, and where a navigation error of even a few miles can trap ships in impenetrable pack ice. The waters contain icebergs of extraordinary size, some larger than entire islands, that create constantly changing hazards requiring navigation, techniques that no previous Viking voyage has demanded. Ice navigation becomes a crucial new skill that Viking navigators must master for Greenland voyages. The Norse developed techniques for reading ice conditions that rival the knowledge of modern Arctic specialists. They learned to distinguish between different types of sea ice, recognizing which formations can be safely traversed and which present deadly traps for unwary vessels. They developed methods for detecting thin ice, pressure ridges, and ice movement patterns that determine whether a particular route remains passable. The biological navigation techniques used successfully in temperate waters require complete adaptation for Arctic conditions. The wildlife of the Greenland waters differs dramatically from that found farther south, requiring navigators to learn entirely new behavior patterns and seasonal migrations. Arctic terns, ivory gulls, and other polar species provide navigation information, but their behavior follows patterns unlike those of temperate seabirds. Seals, walruses, and whales become crucial navigation aids, as their behavior often indicates ice conditions, water depth, and the location of feeding areas that may provide safe anchorages. Weather prediction reaches unprecedented importance during Greenland voyages. The rapid weather changes characteristic of Arctic regions can transform navigable waters into deadly ice fields within hours. Viking navigators develop extraordinary sensitivity to atmospheric conditions, learning to detect the subtle signs that precede Arctic storms, ice movements, and the formation of dangerous fog banks that can persist for days in the cold Arctic air. The establishment of permanent settlements in Greenland requires navigation techniques that ensure reliable communication with Iceland and Norway. The success of the colonies depends on regular supply voyages that must navigate the treacherous Davis Strait with predictable regularity. Viking navigators developed systematic sailing schedules that take advantage of seasonal ice conditions, creating reliable transportation links across some of the world's most dangerous waters. The two main Greenland settlements, the eastern settlement near modern Kasiarsuk and the western settlement near modern Nuuk, are positioned with careful consideration of navigation accessibility. Both locations provide protected harbors that remain ice-free during the crucial summer sailing season, while offering access to the hunting and farming resources needed for colonial survival. The selection of these sites reflects sophisticated understanding of Arctic oceanography and seasonal ice patterns. The Greenland colonies also serve as bases for further exploration westward toward what will eventually be recognized as North America. From Greenland's western coast, Viking navigators can observe land across the Davis Strait, leading to the discovery of Baffin Island and the eventual exploration of the North American coast. These westward voyages from Greenland require mastering navigation in waters where traditional European techniques reach their absolute limits. The preservation of navigation knowledge becomes crucial for the Greenland settlement's survival. The small colonial population cannot afford to lose the specialized knowledge required for Arctic navigation, leading to systematic efforts to train new navigators and preserve traditional techniques. The isolated nature of the Greenland colonies creates a unique environment where navigation knowledge is refined and concentrated, producing some of the most skilled Arctic navigators in human history. Archaeological evidence from Greenland reveals the sophistication of Viking Arctic navigation. The distribution of settlement sites reflects detailed knowledge of ice conditions, seasonal variations, and resource availability that could only result from systematic exploration and careful observation. The success of these settlements for nearly 500 years demonstrates that Viking navigation techniques were sufficiently robust to maintain reliable transportation links across vast Arctic distances. The Greenland settlements also provide crucial evidence of Viking navigation's adaptability to extreme conditions. Traditional techniques developed in temperate Scandinavian waters prove flexible enough to operate successfully in Arctic conditions when properly modified and adapted. This adaptability suggests that Viking navigation represents a systematic approach to seamanship rather than a collection of isolated techniques specific to particular geographic regions. The decline and eventual abandonment of the Greenland settlements during the 14th and 15th centuries may reflect changes in navigation conditions as much as climatic deterioration. The Little Ice Age creates more severe ice conditions that make traditional navigation routes increasingly dangerous, while changes in ocean current patterns disrupt the biological and oceanographic markers that Viking navigators depend upon for successful Arctic voyages. The legacy of Viking Greenland navigation extends far beyond medieval achievement. The techniques developed for Arctic navigation influenced later European exploration of polar regions, while the systematic approach to Arctic colonization provides templates that will be used during modern Arctic development efforts. The survival of the Greenland colonies for nearly half a millennium demonstrates that human settlement in extreme Arctic conditions is possible when supported by sufficiently sophisticated navigation and transportation systems. Chapter 9. The discovery of Vinland. Leif Erikson adjusts his grip on the steering oar as his longship crests another North Atlantic swell, the familiar weight of 30 men and their provisions causing the vessel to settle deep into the trough between waves. The year is approximately 1000 CE, and ahead lies something no European has ever seen: the forest-covered coastline of North America. But Leif's arrival here is no accident of wind and current. Every technique mastered by 3 generations of Viking navigators has contributed to this moment. When European eyes first gaze upon the shores of what they will call Vinland, the land of wild grapes, the Viking discovery of North America represents the culmination of Norse navigation achievement, the successful completion of a journey that spans over 2,000 miles from Norway to Newfoundland through some of the world's most challenging waters. This voyage requires the integration of every navigation technique developed during previous Atlantic crossings, pushed to levels of precision and endurance that won't be matched by other Europeans for another 500 years. Leif's voyage builds upon intelligence gathered during an earlier accidental discovery by Bjarni Herjolfsson, a merchant who was blown off course while sailing from Iceland to Greenland around 986 CE. Bjarni's account of forested lands lying west of Greenland provides the crucial information Leif needs to plan a systematic exploration voyage. However, transforming Bjarni's fragmentary observations into a successful navigation plan requires extraordinary skill in dead reckoning and course projection across vast ocean distances. The navigation challenges of reaching North America from Greenland are formidable. The Davis Strait between Greenland and Baffin Island contains some of the world's most treacherous ice conditions, while the Labrador Sea south of Baffin Island presents its own hazards in the form of icebergs, fog, and unpredictable currents. The voyage requires crossing multiple climate zones and ocean systems, each demanding different navigation techniques and equipment. Leif's route likely takes him northwest from Greenland's western settlement across the Davis Strait to Baffin Island, which the sagas describe as Helgeland or Flat Stone Land. This crossing, though relatively short at about 200 miles, requires precise navigation through ice-infested waters where a navigation error could trap the expedition in pack ice or dash it against hidden ice shelves. The successful completion of this segment demonstrates the Vikings' mastery of ice navigation techniques developed during the Greenland settlement period. From Baffin Island, Leif's expedition continues south along the Labrador coast, discovering what the sagas call Markland or Forestland, likely the forested regions of Labrador and northern Newfoundland. This coastal voyage requires adapting traditional navigation techniques to an entirely unknown coastline, where familiar landmarks are absent and traditional harboring techniques must be modified for unfamiliar coastal conditions. The discovery of Vinland itself, probably located somewhere in Newfoundland or the maritime provinces, represents a navigation achievement of extraordinary precision. The saga accounts describe specific coastal features, harbor characteristics, and resource distributions that allow for positive identification of landing sites. This level of detail suggests systematic coastal reconnaissance using the same techniques developed during the exploration of Iceland and Greenland. The navigation techniques required for the North American voyages push Viking seamanship to its absolute limits. The extreme northern latitudes mean that traditional solar navigation techniques must be modified for conditions where the sun barely rises during winter months and never sets during summer. Celestial navigation requires mastering the behavior of unfamiliar star patterns visible only in North American skies. Current navigation becomes crucial for the North American voyages, as the Labrador Current provides the primary means of southward progress along the eastern Canadian coast. This cold Arctic current carries icebergs and creates distinctive water conditions that serve as navigation references, but it also presents hazards that require constant vigilance and expert seamanship. The ability to detect and exploit favorable current conditions while avoiding dangerous ice makes the difference between successful voyages and disasters. The biological navigation techniques used successfully in European waters require complete adaptation for North American conditions. The wildlife of the Western Atlantic differs dramatically from that found in European seas, requiring navigators to learn entirely new behavior patterns and seasonal migrations. However, the systematic approach to biological navigation developed during earlier voyages proves adaptable to these new conditions. The establishment of temporary settlements in Vinland demonstrates the Vikings' ability to extend their navigation network across the entire North Atlantic. The saga accounts describe multiple voyages between Greenland and North America, suggesting that reliable navigation routes were established and maintained for several years. This achievement requires navigation consistency that approaches modern standards of precision and reliability. Archaeological evidence from Lance O Meadows in Newfoundland confirms the historical accuracy of the saga accounts and demonstrates the sophistication of Viking navigation planning. The site selection reflects careful consideration of harbor conditions, resource availability, and defensive positioning that could only result from systematic exploration and evaluation. The temporary nature of the settlement suggests that the Vikings recognized the navigation challenges involved in maintaining permanent colonies at such distances from their home bases. The North American voyages also reveal the limits of Viking navigation capabilities. Despite their remarkable achievements, the Norse are unable to establish permanent colonies in North America, probably due to the extreme distances involved and the navigation challenges of maintaining regular supply routes. The eventual abandonment of Vinland exploration suggests that even Viking navigation techniques have practical limits when extended across truly oceanic distances. The navigation records preserved in the Vinland sagas provide invaluable insights into Viking techniques and capabilities. The detailed sailing directions, distance estimates, and coastal descriptions reveal the precision and systematization of Norse navigation knowledge. These accounts demonstrate that Viking navigation was based on careful observation and systematic record-keeping rather than luck or accident. The psychological impact of the North American discovery extends far beyond its immediate practical consequences. The successful completion of voyages to North America proves that the Atlantic Ocean presents no insurmountable barrier to skilled navigators, establishing precedents that will influence all subsequent European exploration efforts. The navigation techniques developed for the Vinland voyages provide conceptual frameworks that will be used centuries later, during the Age of Exploration. The legacy of Viking North American navigation continues to influence modern understanding of pre-Columbian exploration. The systematic approach to oceanic voyage planning, the integration of multiple navigation techniques, and the development of reliable transatlantic transportation links provide templates that remain relevant to modern long-distance sailing and exploration efforts. Modern attempts to replicate the Vinland voyages using traditional techniques have confirmed the feasibility of Viking navigation methods while highlighting their extraordinary sophistication. Contemporary sailors using reconstructed Viking vessels and traditional navigation techniques have successfully completed voyages from Scandinavia to North America, validating the historical accounts while demonstrating the remarkable skill levels required for such achievements. Chapter 10. The Decline of Traditional Navigation. The year is 1066, and Harald Hardrada lies dying on the battlefield of Stamford Bridge, his dreams of English conquest shattered by Saxon spears. With his death ends not just a military campaign, but an entire age of maritime dominance. The last of the great Viking sea kings has fallen, and with him dies the golden age of Norse navigation mastery that has ruled the North Atlantic for nearly 3 centuries. The techniques that carried longships from Norway to North America are about to face their greatest challenge, not from enemy fleets or Arctic storms, but from the relentless march of technological progress and changing political realities. The decline of traditional Viking navigation begins not with a single catastrophic event, but with the gradual erosion of the conditions that made Norse seamanship supremely effective. The medieval warm period that facilitated Viking expansion starts to wane around 1100 CE, leading to harsher weather conditions that make traditional navigation techniques increasingly dangerous and unreliable. The pack ice around Greenland becomes more extensive and persistent, while storm patterns in the North Atlantic grow more severe and unpredictable. The transformation of European maritime culture profoundly impacts the transmission of traditional navigation knowledge. The rise of professional merchant guilds creates new models of maritime organization that emphasize standardized procedures and written documentation over the personal mentorship relationships that sustain Viking navigation traditions. The guild system, while providing important benefits for maritime commerce, fundamentally alters how navigation knowledge is acquired and maintained. Young sailors increasingly learn from manuals and formal instruction, rather than through the intensive apprenticeships that produced master Viking navigators. The economic shifts accompanying the High Middle Ages redirect maritime activity away from the long-distance exploration and raiding that showcased Viking navigation capabilities. The growth of territorial kingdoms creates more profitable opportunities in coastal trade, reducing the incentives for oceanic voyages that required the most sophisticated navigation techniques. The establishment of permanent trade routes with known harbors and familiar landmarks makes the encyclopedic environmental knowledge of Viking navigators seem less essential for commercial success. The demographic changes following the Viking Age create fundamental shifts in Scandinavian maritime culture. The consolidation of royal power under unified monarchies reduces the independence of local chieftains who had sponsored exploration and raiding expeditions. The centralization of political authority creates different incentive structures that favor territorial consolidation over maritime expansion, while the increasing complexity of royal administration requires skilled individuals to serve in bureaucratic rather than maritime roles. The introduction of new materials and construction techniques gradually transformed ship design in ways that reduce the advantages of traditional Viking navigation methods. The adoption of iron reinforcement, larger sailplans, and deeper keels creates vessels better suited for heavy cargo transport, but less capable of the shallow water operations that made Viking navigation so effective. These new ship designs require different sailing techniques and navigation approaches that do not fully utilize the environmental awareness skills that Viking navigators had developed. The rise of Mediterranean navigation traditions introduces alternative approaches to seamanship that compete with Viking methods. The Potolin charts developed by Italian navigators provide detailed coastal information that reduces reliance on the mental maps and oral traditions that sustained Viking navigation. While these early charts are limited in scope and accuracy, they represent a fundamentally different approach to navigation that emphasizes written documentation over personal experience and environmental observation. The development of institutional navigation training programs marks a crucial shift away from the traditional Viking model of knowledge transmission. The establishment of navigation schools, first in Mediterranean ports and later in northern European cities, creates formal educational systems that standardize navigation techniques while reducing the importance of individual expertise and local knowledge. These institutions, while improving the overall quality of maritime education, contribute to the homogenization of navigation practices that erodes the distinctive characteristics of regional traditions. The changing nature of maritime warfare also contributes to the decline of Viking navigation traditions. The development of larger, more heavily armed warships creates naval combat scenarios where the maneuverability and shallow draft advantages of Viking vessels become less relevant. The new emphasis on artillery and ship-to-ship combat reduces the importance of the coastal raiding tactics that had driven the development of Viking navigation techniques, while the increased size and complexity of naval vessels requires different types of seamanship skills. Religious and cultural changes accompanying Christianization profoundly impact the worldview that sustained Viking navigation culture. The Christian emphasis on divine providence and submission to God as well conflicts with the Viking cultural values that celebrated human skill, courage, and mastery over natural forces. The new religious framework discourages the risk-taking and exploration that had driven Viking maritime development, while the Christian calendar and religious observances create different rhythms of maritime activity that do not align with traditional Viking sailing seasons. The establishment of more extensive overland trade routes reduces the commercial importance of maritime connections that had sustained Viking navigation development. The growth of the Silk Road and other transcontinental trade networks creates alternative means of accessing luxury, goods, and exotic materials that had previously required dangerous ocean voyages. The reduced profitability of maritime trade expeditions eliminates many of the economic incentives that had encouraged the continuous refinement of navigation techniques. The Little Ice Age creates navigation conditions that traditional Viking techniques cannot effectively address. The advancing glaciers and expanding sea ice around Greenland and Iceland make many traditional routes impassable during increasing portions of the year, while the changing ice conditions disrupt the biological patterns that Viking navigators had relied upon for positioning information. The failure of traditional techniques under these new conditions undermines confidence in methods that had proven reliable for centuries. The gradual loss of linguistic connections between different Scandinavian regions contributes to the fragmentation of navigation knowledge. As Old Norse gives way to distinct national languages, the technical vocabulary used to describe navigation techniques becomes less standardized across the region. The sailing directions, weather observations, and coastal descriptions that had been transmitted orally in Old Norse become difficult to translate accurately into emerging national languages, leading to the loss of nuanced technical information. The rise of written culture creates both opportunities and challenges for preserving navigation knowledge. While literacy allows for the documentation of sailing directions and technical procedures, the transition from oral to written transmission often results in the loss of subtle information that cannot be adequately captured in text. The personal knowledge, experiential wisdom, and intuitive understanding that characterized master Viking navigators proved difficult to convey through written instruction alone. The development of more sophisticated astronomical instruments gradually supplants the traditional celestial navigation techniques that had been central to Viking seamanship. The astrolabe, quadrant, and other precision instruments provide more accurate positional information than the traditional methods based on hand measurements and mental calculations. While these new instruments initially supplement rather than replace traditional techniques, they eventually prove superior for most navigation applications and reduce the incentive to maintain traditional skills. The changing patterns of international trade create new maritime challenges that favor different types of navigation expertise. The growth of trade with distant regions beyond the traditional Viking sailing range requires navigation techniques adapted to different climatic conditions, ocean systems, and coastal characteristics. The traditional Viking focus on North Atlantic navigation becomes less relevant as European maritime activity expands into the Mediterranean, Indian Ocean, and eventually the Americas and Pacific. The evolution of maritime law and regulation creates institutional frameworks that standardize navigation practices while reducing the flexibility that had characterized Viking seamanship. The establishment of harbor regulations, shipping codes, and maritime courts creates legal requirements for specific navigation procedures that may conflict with traditional methods. The need to comply with increasingly complex regulatory frameworks reduces the autonomy of individual navigators and creates pressure for standardization across different maritime traditions. The development of marine insurance systems creates economic incentives that favor predictable, standardized navigation procedures over the innovative and adaptive approaches that had characterized Viking seamanship. Insurance underwriters prefer vessels operated according to established procedures with documented safety records, creating market pressures that discourage the experimentation and risk-taking that had driven Viking navigation development. The increasing importance of insurance considerations in maritime planning reduces the willingness of shipowners to employ navigation methods that cannot be easily evaluated and standardized. The demographic disasters of the 14th century create catastrophic disruptions in the transmission of traditional navigation knowledge. The Black Death and other epidemics particularly impact the small, isolated communities where specialized maritime knowledge was concentrated, leading to the death of entire lineages of expert navigators. The social disruption caused by demographic collapse interrupts the long-term mentorship relationships required for transmitting complex traditional skills, creating permanent gaps in knowledge transmission that cannot be fully recovered. The rise of centralized royal navies creates different career patterns for skilled mariners that draw talent away from traditional navigation roles. The opportunity to serve in permanent naval establishments with regular pay and advancement opportunities attracts many of the most capable navigators away from the merchant marine and exploration activities where traditional skills were maintained and developed. The professionalization of naval service creates alternative career paths that reduce the number of individuals committed to preserving and advancing traditional navigation techniques. The increasing complexity of maritime commerce creates specialization patterns that fragment the comprehensive knowledge that had characterized Viking navigation culture. The development of distinct roles for pilots, chart makers, weather observers, and navigation instrument specialists replaces the generalist approach of traditional Viking navigators who integrated all these functions. While specialization improves efficiency in specific areas, it reduces the number of individuals who maintain comprehensive understanding of traditional navigation systems. The changing political relationships between Scandinavian kingdoms and other European powers create diplomatic and military pressures that discourage the independent maritime activities that had sustained Viking navigation culture. The integration of Scandinavian kingdoms into broader European political systems creates obligations and constraints that limit maritime autonomy, while the increasing importance of continental European politics reduces the focus on maritime expansion and exploration that had driven navigation development. Archaeological evidence reveals the gradual transformation of maritime material culture during this period. Excavations of later medieval harbors and shipyards show the replacement of distinctively Viking navigation equipment with tools and instruments derived from Mediterranean and Atlantic European traditions. The disappearance of traditional navigation artifacts from the archaeological record parallels the documentary evidence for the decline of Viking navigation techniques, providing physical confirmation of the cultural transformation taking place in Scandinavian maritime communities. However, the decline process is neither uniform nor complete across all regions and applications. Some areas maintain traditional techniques longer than others, particularly in locations where geographic conditions continue to favor Viking-style navigation methods. The Faroe Islands, parts of Iceland, and remote Norwegian coastal communities preserve elements of traditional knowledge well into the early modern period, adapted to local conditions and requirements while maintaining connections to the broader Viking navigation tradition. The rise of more centralized European kingdoms fundamentally alters the political landscape that fostered Viking expansion. The establishment of stronger royal navies in England, France, and other European powers makes Viking raiding increasingly costly and dangerous. The old strategy of striking undefended coastal targets becomes obsolete as fortifications improve and organized resistance increases. The economic incentives that drove Viking expansion, the capture of slaves, silver, and luxury goods diminish as trade routes become more secure and alternative economic opportunities develop in Scandinavia. The gradual Christianization of Scandinavia profoundly impacts traditional navigation culture. The Old Norse religion that celebrated exploration, conquest, and death in battle gives way to Christian values that emphasize stability, agricultural development, and peaceful trade. The warrior navigator, who once embodied the highest ideals of Norse culture, becomes less relevant in a society increasingly focused on territorial consolidation rather than maritime expansion. The introduction of new navigation technologies from the Mediterranean and the Orient begins to supplant traditional Viking techniques. The magnetic compass, arriving in northern Europe during the 12th century, provides directional information that is more consistent and reliable than traditional methods, particularly during extended periods of overcast weather. While Viking navigators had developed techniques for dealing with poor visibility, the compass offers advantages that prove impossible to ignore. The development of more accurate maps and charts gradually reduces reliance on the oral tradition and personal experience that formed the foundation of Viking navigation knowledge. As written sailing directions become more common and cartographic techniques improve, the need for navigators with encyclopedic knowledge of traditional techniques diminishes. The systematic documentation of navigation knowledge, while preserving some information, also marks the beginning of the end for the apprenticeship system that maintained traditional skills. Changes in ship design also contribute to the decline of traditional navigation methods. The evolution toward larger, deeper draft vessels optimized for cargo carrying rather than coastal raiding reduces the advantages of Viking ship designs. The new vessels cannot access the shallow harbors and river systems that made Viking navigation so effective, while their increased size and complexity require different sailing techniques and navigation approaches. The establishment of the Hanseatic League and other organized trading networks creates alternative economic opportunities that reduce the incentives for long-distance exploration and raiding. The systematic development of trade routes through the Baltic and North Seas provides more reliable profits than the uncertain returns of exploration and conquest. The merchant sailor, focused on efficient cargo transport, gradually replaces the warrior navigator as the dominant figure in Scandinavian maritime culture. The Black Death and other demographic disasters of the 14th century devastate the populations that maintain traditional navigation knowledge. The small, isolated communities that preserve specialized maritime skills are particularly vulnerable to epidemic diseases, leading to catastrophic knowledge loss. Entire lineages of expert navigators disappear, taking with them centuries of accumulated experience and technique refinement. Climate change during the Little Ice Age creates navigation conditions that traditional Viking techniques cannot handle effectively. The increased ice coverage around Greenland and Iceland makes many traditional routes impassable, while changing weather patterns disrupt the biological and oceanographic markers that Viking navigators depend upon. The Greenland colonies, the most remote outposts of Viking navigation achievement, become increasingly isolated and eventually disappear entirely. The consolidation of European political power also reduces the opportunities for independent maritime enterprise that characterized the Viking Age. The rise of powerful monarchies creates more restrictive political environments where unauthorized maritime expeditions become increasingly difficult to organize and finance. The freebooting tradition that enabled Viking expansion gives way to more controlled and regulated forms of maritime activity. Technological developments in metallurgy, optics, and precision manufacturing enable the creation of navigation instruments that surpass traditional methods in accuracy and reliability. The astrolabe, quadrant, and other precision instruments provide positioning information that exceeds what can be achieved through traditional observation and experience. While these instruments initially supplement rather than replace traditional techniques, they gradually prove superior for most navigation applications. The growth of formal education and literacy changes the way navigation knowledge is transmitted and preserved. The oral tradition that maintained Viking navigation techniques for centuries gives way to written instruction and formal training programs. While this transition preserves some traditional knowledge, it also marks the end of the personal mentorship relationships that ensured the highest levels of skill development. The archaeological record reveals the gradual abandonment of traditional navigation equipment and techniques. Excavations of later medieval sites show fewer examples of the specialized navigation tools used during the Viking Age, while ship designs become increasingly standardized according to Southern European models. The distinctive characteristics of Viking maritime culture gradually disappear from the archaeological record. However, the decline of traditional Viking navigation is not complete or immediate. Many techniques survive in modified forms, incorporated into the evolving European navigation tradition. The biological navigation methods, weather prediction techniques, and coastal pilotage skills developed by the Vikings continue to influence maritime practice for centuries after the end of the Viking Age. Some elements of Viking navigation knowledge persist in remote areas where traditional conditions continue to favor old methods. The Faroe Islands, Iceland, and northern Norway maintain some traditional techniques well into the modern period, adapted to local conditions and requirements. These surviving traditions provide valuable insights into the sophistication and effectiveness of original Viking navigation methods. The legacy of Viking navigation extends far beyond the techniques themselves. The conceptual approaches to oceanic navigation, the systematic methods for exploration and route development, and the integration of multiple information sources pioneered by the Vikings influence all subsequent European maritime development. The age of exploration builds directly upon foundations established during the Viking Age, using conceptual frameworks that derive from Norse navigation tradition. Chapter 11: Legacy and Modern Lessons. In a small laboratory at the Danish Maritime Museum, Dr. Skren Nielsen carefully adjusts a reconstructed sunstone crystal, its surface catching the filtered light streaming through a skylight designed to simulate overcast Nordic conditions. Around him, the tools of modern navigation science: GPS receivers, electronic compasses, satellite weather displays stand in silent testimony to how far maritime technology has advanced since the Viking Age. Yet as Skren demonstrates the sunstone's ability to locate the sun's position through thick clouds, something remarkable becomes clear. This thousand-year-old crystal provides navigation information that modern electronics cannot match under these specific conditions. The legacy of Viking navigation extends far beyond historical curiosity. As modern sailors venture into increasingly remote waters, Arctic passages opened by climate change, Southern Ocean routes to Antarctica, and the challenging waters of the world's most isolated regions, they discovered that Viking techniques often prove more reliable than electronic systems. The principles developed by Norse navigators continue to influence modern seamanship, while their systematic approach to maritime problem-solving provides templates for contemporary navigation challenges. The revival of interest in traditional navigation techniques emerges from a growing recognition that electronic systems, while extraordinarily capable, possess inherent vulnerabilities that traditional methods do not share. GPS satellites can be jammed or damaged, electronic compasses can fail, and weather routing computers can provide inaccurate information. The Viking approach of using multiple independent navigation references creates redundant systems that maintain reliability even when individual components fail. Modern sailing expeditions in polar regions increasingly incorporate Viking navigation techniques as backup systems for electronic equipment. The extreme cold of Arctic and Antarctic waters can cause battery failures and electronic malfunctions that leave modern vessels dependent on traditional navigation methods. Contemporary polar explorers find that Viking ice navigation techniques, biological navigation using wildlife behavior, and celestial navigation using traditional instruments often provide more reliable information than electronic systems in these harsh environments. The scientific validation of Viking navigation techniques has revealed the extraordinary sophistication of Norse maritime knowledge. Research conducted by institutions such as the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and the Danish National Museum has confirmed that many traditional techniques provide accuracy that rivals or exceeds modern instruments under specific conditions. Sunstone navigation has been proven effective for solar positioning during overcast conditions, while traditional weather prediction methods often outperform computer forecasting in certain situations. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new aspects of Viking navigation sophistication. Recent excavations in Iceland, Greenland, and Scandinavia have uncovered navigation instruments and ship remains that demonstrate levels of technical achievement previously unrecognized by historians. These discoveries suggest that Viking navigation capabilities may have been even more advanced than indicated by historical records, with some techniques lost during the transition to modern navigation methods. The integration of traditional and modern navigation techniques creates hybrid systems that surpass either approach alone. Contemporary ocean racers and long-distance cruising sailors increasingly combine electronic navigation with traditional observation skills, creating navigation systems that provide both precision and reliability. This synthesis approach draws directly upon Viking concepts of redundant navigation systems and multiple information sources. Climate change research has highlighted the relevance of Viking navigation experience for modern challenges. As Arctic ice patterns shift and new shipping routes become available, the Viking experience with ice navigation and Arctic conditions provides valuable historical perspective on polar navigation challenges. The Norse techniques for detecting and predicting ice conditions, developed during the Greenland settlement period, offer insights that remain relevant for modern Arctic operations. The environmental awareness inherent in Viking navigation techniques provides important lessons for sustainable maritime operations. The Norse approach of working with natural systems currents, winds, and wildlife patterns, rather than overwhelming them with mechanical force, offers models for reducing the environmental impact of modern shipping. Traditional navigation techniques often prove more energy efficient and environmentally compatible than conventional approaches. Educational institutions worldwide have begun incorporating Viking navigation techniques into maritime training programs. The systematic observational skills, pattern recognition abilities, and environmental awareness required for traditional navigation prove valuable for developing well-rounded mariners who can operate effectively even when electronic systems fail. These skills also enhance general seamanship abilities and maritime safety awareness. The psychological aspects of Viking navigation provide insights that remain relevant for modern maritime operations. The confidence and situational awareness developed through traditional navigation training enhance decision-making abilities and risk assessment skills. The intimate knowledge of natural systems fostered by traditional techniques creates deeper understanding of maritime environments. That improves overall sailing performance and safety. Research into Viking navigation has also contributed to developments in autonomous navigation systems. The pattern recognition approaches used by Norse navigators influence artificial intelligence systems designed for unmanned vessels, while traditional techniques for integrating multiple information sources provide models for sensor fusion in automated navigation systems. The Viking approach to navigation problem-solving continues to influence cutting-edge maritime technology development. The cultural dimensions of Viking navigation offer important lessons for modern maritime communities. The systematic approach to knowledge transmission, the emphasis on mentorship and experiential learning, and the integration of navigation skills with broader cultural values provide models for maintaining maritime traditions in an increasingly technological world. The Norse example demonstrates that traditional knowledge systems can coexist with modern technology while providing unique capabilities that pure technology cannot match. Contemporary attempts to replicate Viking voyages using traditional techniques continue to validate the effectiveness of Norse navigation methods. Projects such as the reconstruction and sailing of Viking ships using only traditional navigation have successfully completed voyages from Scandinavia to North America, demonstrating that Viking achievements were based on systematic knowledge rather than luck or accident. These modern experiments also reveal aspects of traditional techniques that were not fully understood from historical records alone. The influence of Viking navigation extends beyond maritime applications to fields such as wilderness navigation, aviation, and space exploration. The principles of using multiple information sources, developing enhanced observational skills, and creating redundant navigation systems prove applicable in any environment where reliable positioning information is crucial for safety and success. As the world faces new navigation challenges, from the opening of Arctic shipping routes to the development of space transportation systems, the Viking example provides a framework for developing robust, reliable navigation systems that can operate effectively in the most demanding environments. The Norse approach of combining systematic observation, accumulated knowledge, and adaptive problem-solving creates navigation methodologies that remain relevant regardless of technological context. The ultimate lesson of Viking navigation may be that the most effective navigation systems combine the best elements of traditional knowledge and modern technology. The Vikings succeeded not because they possessed superior technology, but because they developed superior techniques for using the tools and information available to them. This approach, maximizing the effectiveness of available resources through systematic knowledge and skilled application, remains the foundation of successful navigation in any era. The story of Viking navigation reminds us that human ingenuity, careful observation, and accumulated wisdom can achieve extraordinary results, even with apparently limited resources. As we face the navigation challenges of the 21st century and beyond, the Viking example provides both inspiration and practical guidance for developing navigation systems that are robust, reliable, and capable of operating effectively in the most demanding conditions nature can provide. The military applications of Viking navigation techniques continue to influence modern naval operations. Special forces units operating in hostile environments where GPS signals may be jammed or unavailable increasingly train in traditional navigation methods. The U.S. Navy SEALs, British Royal Marines, and other elite maritime forces incorporate elements of Viking-style environmental observation and backup navigation techniques into their training programs. The ability to navigate accurately using only natural references becomes crucial when electronic warfare tactics deny access to satellite navigation systems. Commercial shipping industries are rediscovering the value of traditional navigation skills as cyber attacks on maritime systems become more sophisticated and frequent. The 2017 GPS spoofing incidents in the Black Sea, where ships reported impossible positions, highlighted the vulnerability of modern navigation systems to deliberate interference. Shipping companies now invest in training programs that teach officers to recognize when electronic systems are providing false information and how to fall back on traditional navigation methods during emergencies. The integration of artificial intelligence with traditional navigation concepts creates fascinating hybrid systems that surpass either approach alone. Modern AI navigation systems increasingly incorporate pattern recognition algorithms based on Viking techniques analyzing wave patterns, weather signs, and biological indicators to provide navigation information that complements electronic positioning. These systems learn to recognize environmental patterns much as Viking navigators did, but with computational power that can process vastly more information simultaneously. Research institutions worldwide continue to validate and expand upon Viking navigation discoveries. The University of Iceland's Marine Research Institute has conducted extensive studies of traditional Icelandic navigation techniques, confirming that many methods described in medieval sources provide accuracy comparable to modern instruments. Their research vessel Arni Furriksson regularly conducts experiments using reconstructed Viking navigation equipment, with results that consistently validate historical accounts of Norse navigation capabilities. The psychological training aspects of Viking navigation prove increasingly relevant for developing resilient mariners capable of operating under extreme stress. The confidence that comes from understanding multiple navigation methods, the situational awareness developed through constant environmental observation, and the decision-making skills honed by traditional navigation practice create more capable sailors who perform better during emergencies. Maritime academies worldwide now incorporate elements of traditional navigation training, not just for technical skills, but for the psychological benefits they provide. Archaeological advances continue to reveal new aspects of Viking navigation sophistication that challenge our understanding of medieval technical capabilities. The 2019 discovery of a complete Viking navigation kit in a Norwegian ship burial included instruments whose purposes are still being debated by researchers. High-resolution analysis of these artifacts reveals manufacturing precision that suggests Viking navigation equipment was far more sophisticated than previously recognized. Some of the crystal formations show evidence of deliberate optical modification that enhance their navigation properties. The environmental monitoring capabilities inherent in Viking navigation techniques offer valuable perspectives for modern climate research. The detailed observations of ocean conditions, weather patterns, and wildlife behavior recorded in Viking sources provide baseline data for understanding long-term environmental changes. Climate scientists studying Arctic ice patterns, ocean current variations, and wildlife population changes find that Viking observations often provide the longest available data series for certain phenomena. Modern adventure tourism increasingly incorporates authentic Viking navigation experiences as travelers seek more meaningful connections with maritime history. Expedition companies in Norway, Iceland, and Greenland offer voyages using reconstructed Viking vessels navigated by traditional methods. These experiences provide participants with first-hand appreciation for the skill and knowledge required for successful traditional navigation while generating economic support for preserving and transmitting these historical techniques. The space exploration community draws important lessons from Viking navigation approaches for developing navigation systems capable of operating in environments where Earth-based references are unavailable. NASA's research into autonomous navigation for Mars missions incorporates pattern recognition concepts derived from Viking techniques, while the European Space Agency's studies of navigation in deep space environments consider how traditional methods might be adapted for interplanetary travel. The Viking approach of using multiple independent information sources proves particularly relevant for spacecraft operating beyond the range of Earth-based navigation assistance. Cognitive science research into how Viking navigators processed and integrated complex environmental information provides insights valuable for developing enhanced human-machine interfaces. Studies of traditional navigation decision-making processes reveal sophisticated mental models that allow navigators to maintain accurate situational awareness despite constantly changing conditions. These findings influence the design of navigation displays and decision support systems that help modern operators process complex information more effectively. The preservation of traditional navigation knowledge faces ongoing challenges as the communities that maintain these skills continue to modernize. Remote areas of the Faroe Islands, northern Norway, and Iceland still possess individuals with extensive traditional navigation knowledge, but these skills are not being transmitted to younger generations at rates sufficient to ensure their survival. International efforts to document and preserve this knowledge include video recording of traditional techniques, creation of interactive training programs, and establishment of cultural preservation initiatives. Maritime heritage organizations worldwide recognize Viking navigation as a crucial component of global maritime culture that requires active preservation efforts. The International Association of Maritime Universities has established working groups focused on traditional navigation techniques, while UNESCO considers Viking navigation knowledge eligible for inclusion in its Intangible Cultural Heritage Program. These efforts seek to ensure that the knowledge developed over centuries of Viking seafaring remains available for future generations. The philosophical implications of Viking navigation extend beyond practical applications to questions about human capabilities and our relationship with the natural world. The Viking approach demonstrates that humans can develop extraordinary sensory abilities and environmental awareness when necessity and culture combine to encourage such development. This raises important questions about what human capabilities we may be losing in our increasingly technology-dependent society and whether we should actively preserve and develop traditional skills as complements to modern technology. Modern sailing competitions increasingly include traditional navigation categories that test competitors' abilities using only Viking-era techniques. The annual Traditional Navigation Challenge, held in various North Atlantic locations, requires participants to navigate complex courses using only traditional methods and equipment. These competitions maintain interest in historical techniques while providing venues for testing and refining traditional navigation skills under controlled conditions. The therapeutic applications of traditional navigation training emerge as mental health professionals recognize the benefits of activities that require focused attention, pattern recognition, and direct engagement with natural environments. Programs for treating PTSD, depression, and anxiety disorders increasingly incorporate elements of traditional navigation training as part of wilderness therapy approaches. The combination of skill development, environmental awareness, and confidence building inherent in navigation training proves particularly effective for certain therapeutic applications. Industrial applications of Viking navigation principles influence the development of navigation systems for autonomous vehicles operating in challenging environments. Self-driving cars, autonomous drones, and robotic submarines incorporate sensor fusion techniques inspired by traditional navigation approaches. The Viking method of using multiple independent information sources to maintain accurate positioning proves particularly valuable for autonomous systems operating in environments where individual sensors may provide unreliable information. The economic implications of traditional navigation knowledge become apparent as shipping costs rise and environmental regulations increase pressure for more efficient maritime operations. Traditional techniques for reading currents, predicting weather, and optimizing sail trim can reduce fuel consumption and improve passage times for commercial vessels. Some shipping companies now employ consultants with traditional navigation expertise to optimize route planning and vessel handling techniques. Research into the biomechanics of traditional navigation reveals how Viking navigators developed enhanced sensory capabilities through systematic training and practice. Studies of balance, spatial orientation, and sensory integration in traditional navigators provide insights valuable for training modern mariners and developing rehabilitation techniques for individuals with balance or spatial orientation disorders. The Viking emphasis on developing multiple sensory channels for navigation information proves relevant for understanding and treating various neurological conditions. The cultural exchange facilitated by Viking navigation continues to influence modern understanding of medieval global connections. Recent archaeological discoveries suggest that Viking navigation techniques may have influenced maritime practices in other parts of the world, while Viking navigators may have learned techniques from other seafaring cultures during their extensive travels. This cultural cross-pollination demonstrates that navigation knowledge development was an international phenomenon that transcended individual cultures. The artistic and literary legacy of Viking navigation influences contemporary culture in ways that extend far beyond historical recreation. Modern literature, film, and art draw inspiration from the dramatic achievements of Viking navigators, while the techniques themselves inspire metaphorical applications in fields ranging from business strategy to personal development. The Viking approach to navigating uncertainty and achieving ambitious goals, despite limited resources, provides powerful symbolic frameworks for addressing contemporary challenges. Environmental conservation efforts benefit from traditional navigation, perspectives that emphasize working with natural systems rather than opposing them. The Viking approach of using currents, winds, and natural phenomena as aids rather than obstacles provides models for developing sustainable transportation and energy systems. Contemporary efforts to harness ocean currents, wind patterns, and other natural forces for renewable energy draw inspiration from traditional navigation techniques that demonstrated how to work effectively within natural systems. The international cooperation required to preserve and study Viking navigation techniques creates valuable models for addressing other global challenges that require coordination across national boundaries. Research projects involving institutions from multiple countries, sharing of traditional knowledge between cultures, and collaborative preservation efforts demonstrate how common interests in maritime heritage can transcend political divisions and create lasting cooperative relationships. The measurement and quantification of traditional navigation accuracy continues to reveal the sophistication of Viking techniques while highlighting areas where modern understanding remains incomplete. Precision GPS measurements of voyages conducted using only traditional navigation methods consistently demonstrate that skilled practitioners can achieve accuracy levels that rival modern instruments under many conditions. However, these studies also reveal that traditional techniques require extensive training and practice to achieve their full potential. The integration of traditional navigation knowledge with modern weather forecasting and oceanographic data creates hybrid systems that surpass either approach alone. Contemporary weather routing services increasingly incorporate traditional weather signs and pattern recognition techniques into their forecasting models, while oceanographic research benefits from traditional observations of current patterns and seasonal variations. This synthesis approach demonstrates the continued relevance of traditional knowledge for understanding and predicting natural systems. The safety implications of traditional navigation training extend beyond backup capabilities to include enhanced risk assessment and emergency response skills. Mariners trained in traditional techniques develop better intuitive understanding of weather patterns, sea conditions, and vessel behavior that improves their ability to recognize and respond to dangerous situations. This enhanced situational awareness proves valuable even when modern navigation equipment is functioning normally. The sociological aspects of traditional navigation knowledge transmission provide insights relevant for preserving other forms of traditional knowledge threatened by modernization. The master-apprentice relationships that maintained Viking navigation skills for centuries offer models for knowledge preservation that emphasize personal mentorship, experiential learning, and gradual skill development over extended periods. These approaches prove particularly effective for transmitting complex practical knowledge that cannot be fully captured in written instructions or formal educational programs. As our journey through the remarkable world of Viking navigation draws to a close, we find ourselves standing where we began, gazing across the vast expanse of the North Atlantic, but now with eyes open to the extraordinary sophistication hidden beneath what initially appeared to be impossible achievement. The Vikings didn't conquer the seas through luck or accident, but through the development of the most advanced navigation system of their age, a comprehensive approach to maritime navigation that integrated celestial observation environmental awareness, and systematic knowledge accumulation into a unified methodology that enabled unprecedented maritime achievements. The techniques we've explored, from reading the subtle language of wind and wave to using sunstones for navigation through overcast conditions, from following the invisible highways of ocean currents to interpreting the behavior of seabirds as living compasses, reveal a level of systematic observation and accumulated knowledge that rivals modern scientific approaches to navigation. The Vikings transformed the seemingly chaotic ocean environment into an ordered system of information sources, each providing crucial data for safe and accurate navigation across vast distances. Perhaps most remarkably, they achieved all this without the benefit of maps, magnetic compasses, or any of the navigation instruments we consider essential for ocean voyaging. Their success demonstrates that human sensory capabilities, when properly trained and systematically applied, can provide navigation information of extraordinary precision and reliability. The Viking navigator, with his encyclopedic knowledge of natural patterns and his highly developed observational skills, functioned as a human navigation computer of remarkable sophistication. The legacy of Viking navigation extends far beyond historical achievement into contemporary relevance. As modern mariners venture into increasingly challenging environments, Arctic waters opened by climate change, remote ocean areas where electronic systems prove unreliable, and extreme conditions where traditional techniques often surpass modern instruments, the Viking example provides both practical guidance and conceptual frameworks for addressing 21st century navigation challenges. Their systematic approach to navigation problem solving, emphasizing redundant information sources and adaptive techniques that remain effective under varying conditions, offers valuable lessons for developing robust navigation systems in any technological context. The Viking integration of environmental awareness, accumulated knowledge, and skilled observation creates navigation methodologies that remain relevant regardless of available technology. The story of Viking navigation ultimately reminds us that the most significant achievements in human history often result not from superior technology, but from the systematic development and application of human capabilities. The Vikings succeeded because they observed more carefully, remembered more systematically, and applied their knowledge more skillfully than their contemporaries. Their navigation achievements represent the triumph of human ingenuity over technological limitations. As we face the navigation challenges of our own era, from autonomous vessels to space exploration, from polar operations to environmental conservation, the Viking example provides enduring inspiration. Their success demonstrates that seemingly impossible achievements become possible when human knowledge, skill, and determination are systematically developed and expertly applied. The Vikings didn't just cross the Atlantic. They mastered it through techniques that transformed an apparently hostile environment into a navigable highway system. Their achievement stands as one of the greatest triumphs of human navigation, a testament to what becomes possible when careful observation, accumulated wisdom, and skilled seamanship combine to overcome the most daunting challenges nature can present. In an age increasingly dependent on electronic systems and artificial intelligence, the Viking navigators remind us that human capabilities, when properly developed and systematically applied, can achieve extraordinary results. Their techniques required no external power sources, suffered no system failures, and operated reliably under the most extreme conditions. Most importantly, they could be learned, practiced, and perfected by anyone willing to invest the time and effort required for mastery. The Vikings conquered the seas not through technological superiority, but through the patient accumulation of knowledge, the careful development of observational skills, and the systematic integration of multiple information sources into comprehensive navigation systems. Their achievement represents one of humanity's greatest triumphs over environmental challenges, a victory won through intelligence, perseverance, and an unshakable belief that the impossible could become possible through human skill and determination. As we continue to explore our planet's most remote waters and venture into the vast expanses of space, the Viking legacy reminds us that the most reliable navigation systems are those that combine the best of human knowledge with whatever technology is available. The Norse navigators who first crossed the Atlantic without maps didn't just discover new lands, they discovered new possibilities for human achievement that continue to inspire and guide us today.